A 96-year-old New York City landlord hasn't been paid rent for the last 3 years, and he is owed $130,000, but he can't evict the tenant due to the eviction moratorium. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and once again, it's coming out of New York City. So I keep bringing up New York because landlords up there, especially the small mom and pop landlords, are suffering immensely, okay? They have so many, tenant protections, they have so many rules and regulations, and they have such an awful bureaucracy up there in New York that it makes it very, very difficult to be a landlord. So I like to cover stories about, some of the individual stories of what happens to some of the small mom and pop landlords who get caught up in all of this bureaucracy. All the rules and regulations that they pass, trying to, oh yeah, we're gonna, hit these big corporations bad. Well, guess what? They also hit the small mom and pop landlord who maybe owns one property and it is their whole retirement income. So in this case, that is exactly what happened, and it's absolutely awful. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think, okay? Do you think that New York is probably the worst place in the entire country to be a small mom and pop landlord? And if not New York, what do you think it is? California, Seattle? I mean, honestly, I think that there is great money to be made in New York, but you got to have, huge cash reserves. You got to have a lot of money and, a really strong long-term investment plan. And it might not be the best thing to be, a property owner who has one, like duplex or something up in New York, or one small multifamily building that falls under rent control, I mean, I know I wouldn't want to do it. And even with the appreciation and all that, it becomes a nightmare when you have to, follow all these rules and pay for all these repairs, and you're not getting the rent increases that make it even possible to make a profit. Oh man, so let's get into this article. It's coming from CBSnews.com, and it says, a 96-year-old Brooklyn landlord can't evict tenant who hasn't paid rent in almost 3 years. Yeah, pretty sad story. So the article actually has a video with it, and I'll play a little part of that video right now.
I've spent $130,000. I cannot afford to keep this man on this property.
Pantano says 80% of his retirement income comes from this two-bedroom condo on Benson Avenue in Brooklyn. He bought it back in 1984.
I don't want him there, no matter what. I want him out.
Pantano filed to evict his tenant in 2019, but then COVID hit and an eviction moratorium took effect, freezing the process. The moratorium was lifted in January of this year, but now another hurdle.
The only thing that's holding it up, it seems, is the ERA.
All right, so let's get into the article. For months, CBS 2 has been reporting on landlords of smaller properties, mom and pop landlords, who say their tenants have not paid rent in years. The problem was exacerbated by the pandemic. Monday, CBS 2's Natalie Dudridge spoke with an elderly landlord who still can't evict, even though the eviction moratorium was lifted months ago. It's disrupting my family and everything else. It's a nightmare, Bill Pantano said. We first interviewed Pantano early in 2021. The 96-year-old landlord said his tenant had not paid rent since September of 2019. I've spent $130,000. I cannot afford to keep this man on my property, Pantano said. Yeah, and that is the problem right there. Now, if you have a mortgage payment, then you got to continue making that mortgage payment, whether your tenant is paying you rent or not, okay? You got to keep paying the utilities. I don't know if this property, he is supposed to cover the utilities or not, but if he does, then, the utilities are on him. He's got to pay the property taxes to the state of New York. He's got to pay for his insurance. And you know what? You got to keep that building maintained. So for the last 3 years, you've gotten no income from this tenant, and the expenses have added up to $130,000, okay? Yet you can't get this tenant out. The eviction moratorium, even in New York State, has ended, but guess what? They put a little clause into the emergency rental assistance program that basically allows tenants to stay not paying rent indefinitely going forward. And let's keep going in this article because they explain it a little bit better. Pantano said 80% of his retirement income comes from the 2-bedroom condo on Benson Avenue in Brooklyn. He bought it in 1984. I don't want him there. No matter what, I want him out, Pantano said. Pantano filed to evict the tenant in 2019. A court date was set for April 2020, but COVID hit and an eviction moratorium took effect. The moratorium was lifted in January of 2022, but now he's facing another hurdle. The only thing that's holding it up, it seems, is the ERAP. He said, ERAP stands for Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which allows tenants to apply for back rent accumulated during the pandemic, which would go to landlords. Yeah, and I've talked about this issue before. Basically, in New York State, if a tenant applies for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, then that stops the eviction process. Okay, regardless of if they actually are qualified to get, this emergency rental assistance or not. So that means that landlords have to continue to keep that tenant in that property, not paying rent indefinitely. Not only that, but I believe I read somewhere that the ERAP program is out of money. Okay, New York doesn't have any more money to pay landlords with. This is, how crazy this whole system is. They've created a system where, hey, the tenant gets to live for free on the backs of a landlord, and the landlord has no possible way of ever recuperating or recovering this money. Okay? This is ridiculous. Okay? And I can't believe that they would even put this sort of thing into play, but they did. They did because, you know what? They believe so strongly in their socialist policies that, they think that, hey, well, we're going to implement socialism. We're going to make you pay for someone else to live for free. That's what socialism is, okay? Even if a decision is not made on ERAP, that automatically stops the case, Lieb said. So people on the tenant side are playing all sorts of games to delay. New York City's housing court said there are approximately 75,000 cases currently awaiting decisions. There is such an enormous backlog, Assemblyman Jeff Dinowitz said. Dinowitz, one of ERAP's co-sponsors, acknowledged the program is far from perfect. We went to great lengths to try to protect tenants from eviction. We also didn't want landlords to be forced into horrible economic situations, Dinowitz said. Yeah, well, you're an idiot, Dinowitz. You're an idiot, because if you didn't realize that this was going to automatically force landlords into a horrible economic situation, then you are an idiot. It's that simple. You said you went to great lengths to protect tenants from eviction. You went to lengths so great that you literally went down to this 96-year-old guy's house, right? You drained his bank account, you stole all the money from his pocket, and then you kicked him in the butt and said, have a nice day. Okay, that's what you did. Went to great lengths to make sure that landlords wouldn't be what an idiot, and this is the typical politician who thinking, oh well, I'm going to please my voters. There's more tenants in New York than there are landlords, so guess what, those are the ones that you're trying to get the votes from, and screw everybody else. That's all these politicians care about, is their votes. If a landlord accepts payment from ERAP, the tenant cannot be evicted for the next 12 months. I'm at wit's end, Pantano said. At this point, housing attorneys say landlords are left with few options. Wait for the courts, sell the property at a loss, or sue, a potentially expensive and lengthy process. We reached out to Pantano's tenant and the tenant's attorney, but did not receive a callback before this story was published. So yeah, if you take that emergency rental assistance, guess what? Now they got you on the hook for the next 12 months. So let's say the emergency rental assistance, they pay you, but they're paying you for the rent that's already owed, okay? Not for the rent going forward. So this landlord is owed, $130,000 plus, right? They're not going to get all that money. He's not going to get all that money back. So he's going to get a small fraction of that if he gets anything. Now, I doubt he's going to get anything, but let's just say he gets a small fraction of that, right? And then the tenant doesn't pay anything going forward. So for the next 12 months, he's got to keep that tenant in there, not paying. And then finally, he can file for eviction against the tenant. You see, this is why a lot of landlords were not accepting, or not wanting to participate in the emergency rental assistance program. And I don't blame them, okay? Those rules, they basically set you up for failure. They set you up to lose. They set the tenant up to basically get everything handed to them for free and get to live for free and have absolutely zero consequences. And meanwhile, the landlord gets set up to lose money every single month that passes. So I hope this landlord, I hope he makes it out of this. He's an elderly guy. This was his retirement, and it's just not right that they completely screwed him over like this.